Hi guys, welcome again to my vlog. This one is on the coaching process, which will focus on me as a coach. Ultimately, I was required to plan a session, record myself delivering it, and then review and reflect back on my coaching behaviours. The session was delivered to 18 Youth Academy football players. I wasn't able to film the group I usually work with because of their age, so I'd only worked with this group a couple of times. The players had a range of S&C training age and mixed abilities. The session was also one of the last of the season, so the technical coach wanted to keep the session engaging and fun. The aim of the session was to cover three key areas, these being deceleration, change of direction or agility, and reactive strength for speed. For me, the importance of having the ability to decelerate is highlighted from the work of Bangsbo and Moore, who report that players on average have to perform some sort of change in activity every 4 to 6 seconds. The reason I use plyometrics for speed development is backed by studies such as Kutunen in 2002, who showed that ground contacts need to be very short as they vary between 0.09 seconds and 0.12 seconds during max velocity sprinting. I then had to choose two main events that I feel I could have handled better to improve the outcomes of the session. These were coaching instructions given to the players prior to the session and also the type of feedback given to the players during the session. Underneath, I put a few underlying issues which I feel I was able to reflect on as to why I felt the session should have been better. However, I'll touch upon these later during the video. Unfortunately, the cameraman was unable to record the full warm-up. However, the session started with a ramp protocol. We then went into a quick small-sided game of throw, head and catch, which was designed to be fun but also add potentiation as the game allowed some degree of jumping and landing, which I felt would lead nicely into the main bulk of the session. The players then split into 3 groups of 5 and were instructed to complete the hurdles and spaces, which were used as markers for foot contact during bounding. Players then had to sprint towards a mannequin and make a 90-degree cut and then accelerate again. Each team had a total distance of 30 metres to complete, however these were arranged differently, some with shorter or longer distances, both leading up to and after the cutting action. It was effectively a race with a point given to the team who won each race. The players had 2 races on each course before moving along so that each player could experience different constraints. That was an overview of the session, however the main bulk of this video will now focus on my coaching behaviour during the session. Next, I'm just going to play part of the session where you can listen and observe how I gave a demonstration to the players in pretty windy conditions.
So this bit isn't race, this bit you're working on minimal ground contact, working over here. As soon as I'm done, I'm bounding. These are just the reference guys. As soon as I get to here, it's a sprint out to the mannequin. I've got to get nice and low, touch it, and then it's a sprint out to your pole. So you're working on that deceleration and then ability to accelerate after. So from here, once I blow the whistle, it's a race, go either side, straight out, nice and low, and then I'm out, and it's a race to the end.
So in terms of coaching, I gave a demonstration of the exercises, however on reflection they were a bit half-hearted. I was happy in the sense that my coaching style allowed trial and error on how it's best to perform the 90-degree cut though. Research by Susan Perry in 1998 looked at clinical implications of a dynamic systems theory, which proposes that human movement patterns are caused by a large number of interactive components and that the body is able to self-organise based on the constraints of the task. My argument would be that practices which allow trial and error of a movement would be more suited to motor learning through a dynamic systems approach. I could have used a more command-style approach, which is more related to the information processing theory put forward by Wellford in 1968. However, there seems to be insufficient evidence to support which style of coaching is best for learning, because of course it is very hard to quantify learning. My own personal belief is that there is some good evidence of the dynamic systems approach in practice. In addition, research from Hodges and Frank in 2002 suggests that if the coach gives too many explicit instructions, then the athlete may become too reliant on the coach. An example of explicit instructions might be your foot must be placed here or your knee must bend by such amount, when actually we want to promote implicit learning at an unconscious level so that athletes can correct errors for themselves. I believe that every individual has a varying optimal movement strategy for any given task. However, the problem for me is that there needs to be a threshold on how a movement is performed, i.e. how far someone deviates from a technical model. An example of this is during the 90-degree cutting action where, on reflection and after watching the session back, I observed some players continue to use their inside leg to push off when re-accelerating, whereas I wanted them to use their outside leg. I appreciate it's pretty hard to see this on the camera angle, but here's an example of a player doing that. For me, I go by studies such as the one by Chang and Crane in 2007, which suggests that the majority of the force is generated by the outside leg. During my session, I took quite a while to recognise this, and maybe I should have stepped in and given more of a command style approach once I realised that the players were not getting it. When delivering the session, I realised that some of the players were unaware of how to perform the hurdle jumps and bounding. I've slowed it down here to show you that. You can clearly see that these players are flexing at the knee and hip on the hurdles and also spending far too long on the ground when they should be bounding. I wrongfully assumed that they would only need minimal coaching of these. It turned out that the players were actually late getting out to the pitch for the session, and because I've not worked with this coach before and I haven't built up that sort of relationship with him, I felt under pressure to complete my session within the pre-arranged time. For me, I felt that this meant my delivery was a little bit rushed. In hindsight, I could have spent 2 to 3 minutes on some sort of closed drill where the players could continually practice lots of reps of bounding and hurdle jumps and also basic landing mechanics, as a lot of the players landed on their toes or off balance. Ultimately, if I'd spent 2 to 3 minutes at the beginning making sure players were correcting errors, then I wouldn't have to worry about it later in the session. The other main thing that I would change about my session was the content of the feedback. Here is some of the feedback that I gave to the players.
Make sure as soon as you're going down to the mannequin, try and lower your sense of mass, okay? So as you get to the mannequin, lower yourself, try and point your leg in the opposite direction you want to go. So if I'm turning that way, try minimal knee bend in this leg, drive that way to accelerate out. As you would in your acceleration drills, you need to push the ground away behind you, okay? Make sure on these biometrics as well, it's real short contacts. You're looking for height to get off the ground as quick as you can. Off you go.
As you can hear, the feedback is very internal as I'm getting the players to focus their attention on the positioning of their own body during the task. Immediately following this, I say make sure you drive the ground away. Now, this is an external feedback as this type of cue is designed to shift the player's attention to the outcome of the task. However, on reflection, it seems I may have confused the players by using a mix of both. In hindsight, I should have only focused on external cues, as research from Wolf, McNevin, Shea and McGill and Anderson all show evidence that it is more effective in skill acquisition. I need to be careful how much augmented feedback I give, as the guidance hypothesis put forward by Salamone, Schmidt and Walter suggests that although recurrent feedback to an athlete is beneficial to the learner, it can actually block important information that is essential when trying to obtain an internal depiction of the task. A paper by Lau and Masters in the Journal of Sports Sciences found that using clever and creative analogies creates an implicit learning environment for the athlete, and also allows the coach to make their cues very short and concise. For example, so during the plyometrics I could have said, imagine your leg is like a stiff spring. This still carries an internal cue, however the analogy helps to promote implicit learning. Also, jump like a kangaroo, or imagine the floor is on fire and you want to get off the floor as quickly as possible and stay in the air for as long as possible. Or on the acceleration phase, after the cut, I could have said, stay low and long and drive the ground back as explosively as you can. So just to wrap things up, what could I improve upon? Well, this process has definitely reminded me that I need to plan my coaching styles and interventions much better, and that there is much more to the coaching process than just the setup of the session. An example of something that I would change is that I would have asked players to try using both legs to turn during the cut and then get them to feed back to me. This would have promoted divergent thinking from the players. From now on, I'm going to make sure that I consider when, how and why instructions and feedback are used, and I think that's probably the most important thing I've learned from this. Thanks again for watching my vlog, and I hope you found it interesting.